Welcome to the Gen X Experience, the podcast that celebrates the unique journey of 80s kids navigating midlife. I'm your host, Blythe Alperin. Each episode, my guests and I will share with you the unique differences that define our generation and how we are navigating those differences in the real world. Join me for laughs, insights, and a sense of community. Let's embrace the Gen X Experience together. Welcome back to the Gen X Experience. This is episode 44. And though we are on the last month of the year, we are taking a little trip back to October to the subject we were talking about then, which was perimenopause and menopause. The reason we're revisiting this topic is because I had two guests that I wanted to interview who are the founders of a women's health company. And unfortunately, I took a little trip to New York and Chicago in October and came back with some kind of bug that first made me sound like Roz from Monsters, Inc. and then completely stole my voice on the day that we were supposed to record. But I didn't want you to not hear this conversation, so we recorded at a different time, and now we are airing it here at the beginning of December because I thought it was something important to discuss. We have revisited the topic of perimenopause and menopause, both in our first year, we talked about it, in our second year, and I think we're going to continue to talk about it every year because the conversation is being moved forward. Things are happening. The black box warning was taken away from HRT, which is a huge improvement. Hopefully will help more women realize that HRT is safe. Granted, talk to your doctor. I'm not a doctor. Talk to your doctor before you start anything, but know that things are changing in women's health, hopefully for the better. And Gen X, because we might be forgotten about, but we are a generation that does not go quietly into that good night, and we are not going quietly into the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. We are speaking up. And we're going to keep doing so. And that's why I wanted you to hear from Catherine Malloy and Neha Mehta, who are the founders of a women's health company called Rora, spelled Rora. And their focus right now is on vulvar dryness, a product to help women with that. And you can use it during perimenopause and menopause. You'll hear more about it, but you can use it at other times as well. But they have a great passion for what they're doing, which you will also hear. And I also love that they are doing their due diligence. This is not about just putting something out and making money and marketing, which is definitely happening in this arena because it's a hot button topic. They have done the research and the studies, and they have talked to women, and they make sure that everything they're doing is science-backed. And I love them for that. And I really enjoy talking to them. So enough of my blabbing. Let's get to know the two founders of Rora before we get into my conversation. First up, we have Catherine Malloy. As I said, she's the co-founder of Rora, a women's healthcare company that makes a topical mist that provides instant relief from vulvar dryness. Catherine is passionate about breaking the stigma surrounding hormonal health and creating intuitive products that fit seamlessly into women's daily lives. Prior to founding Rora, Catherine led strategy at The RealReal, a marketplace for luxury consignment, and was a strategy and operations consultant at Deloitte, working in the healthcare and consumer sectors. Outside of work, Catherine is an avid runner, baker, and vintage fashion enthusiast. Catherine has an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management and is a graduate of Northwestern University, where she studied economics and art history. And now let's learn a little bit about Rora's other co-founder, Neha Mehta. With a background in biology, healthcare consulting, and product strategy, Neha brings a blend of scientific rigor and customer-centered design to the products she builds. After studying biology at Brown University and working in research labs, she spent 4 years in healthcare strategy consulting before joining LinkedIn in San Francisco, where she led strategic initiatives, product launches, and product marketing across cross-functional teams. Neha's lifelong passion for women's rights and serving women-driven audiences ultimately led her to pursue her MBA at the Kellogg School of Management, which is where she launched Rora alongside her co-founder, Catherine. Drawing on both her scientific training and extensive customer research, Neha led the formulation of Rora's first product after speaking with more than 400 menopausal women and conducting deep ethnographic research into vulvar dryness and menopause care. Neha can often be found exploring grocery stores around the world, designing her friends' apartments, and watching food documentaries. Neha's mission, and Catherine's, is to help women feel empowered, confident, and deeply cared for throughout every stage of their life. And without further ado, enough of my blabbing, let's get into my conversation with these two fascinating women, Catherine and Neha. Thank you both for joining me. Let's just jump right in and talk about what inspired you to start your own brand that focuses on women going through perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah, great question. So I'll kick us off. Really, how we got super interested in the perimenopause menopause space all started with one simple conversation. So I was at a dinner where I met a successful entrepreneur. She dedicated nearly 25 years to building a business that she was really proud of. And she told me that that year she started menopause and her symptoms were so severe that she couldn't go about her daily life. She was in and out of dozens of specialist doctors trying every alternative therapy available, ranging from nutrition, personal training, acupuncture, etc. And really, nothing was helping her. And she felt like her symptoms were so debilitating that she needed to make a dramatic lifestyle change. So she ended up selling her company and quitting her job and basically restarting from scratch. And I think after that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about, if this is the case for someone that has so much education, so much access, and so many resources at their disposal, what's the status quo for women who don't have that? And so Neha and I really started doing a lot of research in the perimenopause and menopause space. And what we learned is that that experience of quitting your job isn't that uncommon. The reality is around 25% of women will either quit their job or reduce their work schedule due to the severity of their menopause symptoms. And I think once we really saw not only the impact that this was having on women's lives, but the economic impact of perimenopause and menopause, that's where we really got super interested in this space.
Did you want to add anything, Neha?
Yeah, I was just going to add a quick little tidbit. On my end, definitely, I mean, when we heard that whole story, it was so hugely impactful as two women in business school having all these dreams of sort of doing all these big things, and then hearing that these things out of your control can sort of take over in a way that felt very sudden and you don't feel supported. And personally, I've had my experiences with hormonal health conditions. I've had family members who've gone through things like PCOS or endometriosis, and I know firsthand from their experiences how unsettling and truly terrible the whole experience can be, just because there is such a lack of awareness and education. And so when we kind of discovered, and it even feels silly to say discovered because menopause has been around forever, right? It just feels like it's having a moment because people are finally talking about it. But when we discovered that perimenopause and menopause had so many symptoms and it could be so severe, it's like every single woman who lives at that age will go through that. So why isn't there more discussion? Why aren't there more options? So that's kind of a little bit of the thinking behind the scenes as to why we really gravitated also towards perimenopause and menopause for our business.
Because really, I mean, I, as a Gen Xer, like I did not, I knew about menopause, right? But I just thought it was very minimal symptoms. I did not know about perimenopause. I was said a couple times on the podcast till 2019. And then my friends and I started having discussion, and now I feel like we talk about it all the time. Because there's so many symptoms, and I've definitely gone through it. I've had a very rough time, and just even getting diagnosed. So yeah, it is crazy, right? That no one tells us about it. No doctors don't talk about it. Our mothers don't talk about it because I don't think they knew. And I mean, the conversation is changing, but it's still insane because it can start at 35 and every woman is going to go through it, and we're half the population. So it's about time that they started caring about us.
100%.
100%. And I also think so many women have no idea what to expect when it comes to perimenopause. We were having a conversation with someone right before this where they mentioned, they had the worst perimenopause experience, but they didn't realize that they were in perimenopause because they never had a hot flash. And I think hot flashes are the one symptom that when you think of menopause, even if you don't know a lot about it, that's the symptom that you immediately associate with. So, what's interesting is the reality is there's over 30 different symptoms of menopause. And so, for women who might not have those ones that are more common, it's difficult for them to really recognize what's actually happening because there's so little education around that. And that's something that we're really trying to fix.
So as part of your brand, right now you have one product, correct? So
Yes.
as part of your brand, is education definitely going to be part of it? Because, I mean, you want to make sure that women understand that, like, hey, you're not alone, and here's what you can be experiencing. So is that going to be one aim or arm, I should say? That's the word I'm looking for. One arm of your business to provide education as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think in a way, having this brand in and of itself, people seeing it, people interacting with it is a forms of education. All the conversations we have, all the content we put out there, even when we think about things like packaging design and specs, it is really rooted in that ethos, what you just mentioned of like, you're not alone, but also these are things that you should expect. These are normal to expect. And like, come along on this journey. Let's build this community because listen, every single woman is going to go through this. And I think specifically for Catherine and I, we're in our early 30s and we haven't hit that stage yet. But I think it's a really unique opportunity for us to look at women around our age, younger, maybe older, and be like, hey, this is coming up. Let's prepare ourselves. Let's hold on to the joy in the process and just be there. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the times, like when we interact with our the woman who would be purchasing our products, it's, I think the biggest thing women want is validation that they aren't going crazy, that what they're experiencing is normal. And I think having a brand or building a business around it is a really direct way to normalize the conversation.
So, what inspired you to create? I'll let you guys talk about what your product is since you're the experts on it. I did read about it, and I thought it was fascinating too that it's like not sticky and it's not messy and it dries very fast. So, like, what inspired you to create that specific product? And then, maybe talk a little bit about how you went about, without giving secrets away, obviously, how you went about like finding, formulators, and what was that process kind of like? Because I know that can be challenging no matter what, category you're in.
Totally. Yeah, I can speak a little bit to the inspiration, and then Neha, do you want to chat a little bit more about the formulation process?
Yeah, happy to.
Perfect. So, when we got really interested in menopause, Neha and I started off by interviewing around 400 different women about their experiences with different menopause symptoms. That's where we really got oriented around vulvar dryness. And what we did was we would basically host these workshops where we would bring around 20 women in to our office for a session at a time. And we would ask them all about what they were doing today in terms of struggling with vulvar dryness, if there was any sort of products they were using, how they were using them, and just basically walk us through their daily routine. And in those discussions, we really learned that one, people wanted something that was hormone free for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the FDA just removed their black box warning on hormone replacement therapy,
Yay!
which we think is an awesome win for women across the board. We are really excited about that. But there is a population of people that just don't want to use hormones for a variety of reasons, and we recognize that those are valid. And so we wanted to create something that didn't have hormones, that was going to be a great first step for women, either before they're ready to try a hormonal product or if they're not a candidate for it. So, some women, if they're actively involved in chemo or cancer treatment, they're not eligible for hormones. So, that was really important to us. We also spoke with a lot of women where they told us the products that they were trying today were balms or creams, which, while those are great at providing hydration, they require a pretty rigorous application of rubbing something in. And particularly if you're rubbing something in on intimate skin, some women felt that that was invasive, it felt uncomfortable, they were embarrassed to do it, and they definitely didn't want to do it in a public restroom. And so we really thought about what are ways in which we can create a product that is easy to use, fits in our customers' everyday life. Our customers are busy women. Typically, they're very active, they're career oriented. They don't have time to wait around for something to work. They want some instant relief and something that they can use with them on the go wherever they are. And around the time when we were thinking about that, we went on a research trip to South Korea. And when we were there, we really learned a lot about Korean face mists and how they're amazing at providing really lightweight hydration that penetrates the skin but doesn't leave a greasy or sticky residue. It absorbs instantly. And so we basically thought, how can we create a face mist like product for the vulva? And so that was really the original inspiration and something we've been driving towards since.
Yeah, and on the formulation front, I think this is where the scrappiness of a typical like entrepreneurial story comes up. So obviously lots of customer discovery, right? We talked to 400 women, we've done all these focus groups, we're in these intense conversations, and had learned so many bits of information around like what would make the perfect type of product for this type of demographic. And the obvious next step for us would have been to like reach out to a formulator or a contract manufacturer and be like, make this for us. But we were in grad school and this was a really nascent business and we had really no money. And so that wasn't a viable option. And so the way we did it is we got really scrappy. We had a chemical engineer on our team who would sort of work alongside me to help build out the scientific database. My background is in biology in undergrad, and I worked in wet labs, had a little bit of experience. By no way was I, a full-fledged formulator, but it allowed me to really comb through all the PubMed articles, all the scientific literature, even look at big, skincare trends and pick apart what ingredients are doing what and why and how are they sourced and why is this viable for this type of skin but not that type of skin. So essentially in the course of I think like 10 weeks, we created a database. I ordered all of these raw materials from a wholesaler. So these are predominantly like plant botanical oils, extracts, and we consulted with about 50 OBGYNs and derms as well to ensure that what we're creating is actually safe and would be recommended, if it did end up with a patient going into a doctor's office being like, what do you think about this product? And so I remember Catherine and I would have all these discussions in our office during the day. And then later on, I would have all these materials in the kitchen in my little tiny apartment and like literally had this chemist layout set up on my coffee table and just tinkered, and I really learned. I gotta give it out, shout out to the YouTube gods because they taught me a lot of the basics of cosmetic chemistry in terms of your heat stage and how to combine ingredients and when they get denatured and why certain things become emulsified in a certain way, what your suspensions are. And so, long story short, a lot of trial and error, created about 12 different formulas which were viable. And we like tested them for a while. Everything was good. By the way, like when I was doing this, I probably did it the wrong way. I would spray this stuff over my face. Like if my face can withstand it, I feel good about someone who like using it on their arm or their inner thigh or something like that. So created a half a dozen, no, I think about a dozen formulations. And then Catherine and I had these like one-on-one focus groups where we would test all the different formulations with, I don't remember exactly how many women it was, Catherine. Was it like 20, 30, something like that, one by one? And we would have them for an hour long and they would test and give us all this feedback. And we would like scramble the colors and the packaging to get as good feedback as possible. And then we kind of had a clear winner. So that became our what we call our bare bones formulation. And we used that for a while. We made it in our kitchens and we kind of enhanced it. And then it came to a point where we're like, okay, we want to make this a commercial product. Let's get it now in the hands of a chemist and get it professionalized and make sure it's perfect and viable for our manufacturing process.
I love that you were spraying it on your face. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it does because like our skin on our face is very sensitive and thinner, and you would, the skin down there is also sensitive.
Yeah.
So you would just think like, maybe I'll try, yeah, because you're not going to test where it's going to, because you don't know. But yeah, it's trial and error, and yeah, you learn. And
Well,
I love that you had it also that you had like the little chemistry lab in your apartment, because you hear that so many times from founders, like that's how they started. I was just whipping this up in my kitchen and then,
yeah. My roommate would come home and be like, it kind of smells. I'm like, yeah, that's sea buckthorn oil. Like, heated it up a little too much. I think I denatured the protein. So we have had a lot of fun stories like that.
Oh, so your apartment must have had very interesting smells going in and out of
Yeah,
it.
lots of essential oils that we like played around with, decided against. But yeah, it was a good time. It was the best way to learn.
Yeah. Did you ever set off your fire alarms or anything?
Um, no, no,
Okay.
we did not,
Okay.
thankfully. But we did. I did have a bottle burst on me. So
Oh
there's like
no.
a heat phase where you're kind of it's a water boiler, and you're like heating product, and a beaker cracked on me, and that was pretty traumatizing.
I I bet. I mean, the last time I've done chemistry experiments was in high school, and I was always, you're dealing with high school boys. I think I was either a sophomore or junior, and I just remember like, do I really have to have a boy as a partner? Because they're like, let's see if we can blow things up or make it boil over. And yes. Yeah. So, but I mean, it was always fun. But yeah. So, what inspired? I want to make sure I get the name of the product. What inspired? Is it Rora or Rora or like how do you? Just tell me how to pronounce it. So I want to make sure I get it right.
Totally. Yeah. So our brand is called Rora,
Rora. Okay.
Rora. And our name is really inspired by two things. So, first, we really think that any hormonal shift in a woman's life, it's kind of like a new dawn. It's a new era, it's a time of transformation, and it's an inflection point. And so we really wanted a name that was evocative of that. We were inspired by Aurora, who's the goddess of dawn. So we took that name. And then something else that's really important for us as a brand is we are all about speaking out front and in an upfront way about highly stigmatized topics and being straightforward and honest about them. So we like how with this name, Rora, there's this intonation of roar. We think it's really important to say, we're going to be roaring about women's health. We're speaking out, we're advocating for women, and we're advocating for better outcomes. So that's really how we settled on the name. And that's a little bit of the story behind it.
That's awesome. I was thinking that I'm like, does it have to do with Rora? And the thing too is it is so important that yes, we're having these conversations about perimenopause and menopause and trying to take the stigma away from it, trying to take the fear of talking about it. But I hope it also translates to talking about, the way we talk about puberty, the way we talk about pregnancy, the way we talk about miscarriage or PCOS or any of the symptoms, because I think it does us a disservice. I don't know if you guys agree with this, a disservice when we're like, oh, secretive about it. And, like we can call it like Aunt Flo visit, whatever. We can call it whatever. They're calling it cougar puberty, which
Yeah, we see that one
yeah,
all over the internet.
that one I don't totally agree with because I always think of cougar as, the older lady going after the younger man, but maybe it's
Yes.
not. But I think it's important that we, the conversations need to start somewhere. And I think as women, we have to take charge and say, we're not going to like stay in the shadows about the joys and struggles and the grossness sometimes of being a woman. Cause it's not, there are things going on. You're like, really? Come on.
100%. And I think something that we've seen too is, on this podcast, we've been talking a lot about perimenopause, menopause. The reality with women that struggle with vulvar dryness, with these are the women we're building for, is yes, a lot of them are in menopause or perimenopause, but a lot of them aren't. They're dealing with dryness because they're breastfeeding, or they just switched their birth control, or they started antidepressants. There's so many reasons why people deal with issues like this. And so we're really just trying to normalize the discussion around this because at some point in their life, 50% of women will struggle with vulvar dryness for whatever reason. There's nothing to be ashamed about. And we think that explaining what the different causes are and opening that discussion up for women is really important.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more around normalizing the conversation. I feel that the more people can speak openly, the more you can sort of feel seen and heard, and the more it becomes a topic of conversation, the more it gets established as a problem that needs to be solved. And I think, you see this conversation. We're on social media now, so we see this a lot around just women's health in general being really understudied and under researched and also not spoken about freely. And I think the tide is slowly changing. Um, Not as fast as I personally would love, but I think part of that, and by no means do I mean to say that this is, because women aren't talking about it enough. I think the more we talk about it, the more we can sort of accelerate that progression as well. So, and also like bring our partners, bring men into the conversation. I also disagree with the fact that, this has to be only the women's burden to carry in terms of this is what we're facing. It's like, this is what humans face. And if you're in a partnership, like we often get, in these investor type meetings, we often pitch to men and they'll be like, well, I can't relate to this, but my wife probably knows what you're talking about. He's like, but if you could give me some tips, I'd love that. And we hear this sentiment a lot. And, um, I just think there's so much more room to converse more casually and openly about this across the genders.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you, Catherine, that you brought up that it can be used not just when you're in perimenopause and menopause, because yes, there are times throughout a woman's life where, you have vulvar dryness. And I swear sometimes I'm like, I'm a writer. Why can I not speak? So, I think my brain is working faster than my mouth, but you will experience dryness. And it's nice to know that there's something there that can help you, that maybe you don't have to go to your doctor. You can just, it's easier access and you can take it on the go. um, and you can use it in a public bathroom without like dealing with, coming out with your hands like, okay, I gotta, yeah.
Exactly.
And I also, yes, men need to be part of this conversation. I wish that, I don't know, did you guys, when you were in school, in like elementary school or early junior, have like the talk where they separated the boys and the girls?
Yes.
I think we should just, maybe that's too young of an age, but I think it's so important that men understand us, because I feel like we learn about them and they have no clue and they'll say the dumbest things or they're not understanding, and we all need to be in this together because it's can be challenging.
So
100%.
I don't know how it was, but I know for where I grew up in Connecticut. We had to learn about like the men's side of things, the boys' side of things, and I remember learning anatomy. But I never thought about if they fully taught, women's health to the boys in fifth and sixth and seventh grade. But I know that's so state dependent as well. But I think the earlier the conversation is had, the less at that age, I know anything like that can feel embarrassing, but I just feel like it's easier to have it when you're younger.
Yeah, and the earlier you start, then it's less confusing. And I think too, as women, there's so many times where, you're dating somebody and then you get your period and you weren't expecting it, and it's just like having to talk about it, or even just going to the bathroom at a guy's house, which is ridiculous. But it's hard to have conversations. I mean, I was in a relationship in 2023 with a guy when I was trying to figure out my perimenopause, and he was not understanding or helpful, and be like, oh, calm down. I wanted to punch him.
Yeah.
And it,
Oh, he
yeah,
said, "Calm down." That's
he just, I was going to like so many doctors and he just wasn't, I don't think he cared, didn't know how to be empathetic. Hence why, one of the reasons why we're not together anymore. But I think it's important that we're all having these conversations. And if you start young, then women, we don't get embarrassed, and men aren't being like grossed out by our bodies. Even though, I'm sorry, men, sometimes y'all are more disgusting and don't understand what's going on, that but I think, yeah, I think if we, have these conversations, and I think starting your brand is a good way to, to have a platform to do that as well.
100%. And I think something that we've seen from a lot of the women that we've spoken to, particularly if they're married, is that perimenopause and menopause can be one of the most difficult times in their relationship. Um, One, because this tends to happen when you're kind of the busiest in your life. Oftentimes, you're probably a senior leader at work, you're successful, maybe you're running your own company. And it also coincides for a lot of women where you have children that are maybe in their later teens. They're applying to college, they're in high school. It's a very time consuming stage of life for families. And so what we've seen is that For women where they feel like they have an empathetic partner and they can speak to their partner honestly about what they're experiencing and have a supportive partner, that really makes a difference. Versus we've talked to other women who have said, them dealing with menopause has really put such a tax on their relationship that it's had them consider things like a separation or a divorce because it creates such a gap in their communication with their partner that really kind of results in a relationship breakdown. And so I think that's another reason why we're trying to tell both women and men, this is something that's inevitable if you reach a certain age of life. And it's important to talk about, not only for your physical health and your mental health, but for the health of your relationships.
Yeah, because I think there's statistics, I don't know the exact number, but that divorce does rise during this time because women are just we're just had it. We have very low tolerance and we don't feel like ourselves. And I definitely remember times where when the medicine wasn't figured out or HRT, and I was like, I don't recognize myself. I don't feel like myself in my body. So, and it was hard to understand that. So trying to explain that to a man, and if he's not listening, you're like, bye bye.
Yeah, I just think it's a time of a big identity shift for women. And we even talk to women who feel like there's a little bit of a loss when it comes to being in menopause. You can no longer have children anymore. And as a result, some women have said, I feel like I don't have any value in society, which for me is such a sad thing to hear, but it also just reveals how this is such a seismic identity shift for women. And I think the more we can understand that, the more we can really be empathetic of people that are having these experiences.
And the other
Absolutely.
thing I'll add is something we've noticed is just this aversion to being branded under menopause because it is branded as this, you know, awful thing that only happens to you when you're later in life and then you're old. And we hear this time and time again. These are not my words. And I think it's like the more you kind of embrace this idea that it's a transition, to your point, like perimenopause, we were just talking to a practitioner, can be 2 to 10 years. And then menopause, and then there's postmenopause. It's just supposed to be this sort of gradual evolution and rebirth. And to Catherine's point, a huge shift in identity, but also I just feel like the PR on the word menopause is just so bad, and like really hoping that that shifts, because I think the more you embrace it, the better. And I'd like to hope that when we get to that phase that we can be a little bit more positive and encouraging rather than feel this huge sense of sort of discouragement or just sadness.
Yeah, because it's when I used to think about menopause when I was younger, I thought it happened, yeah, like maybe in my 60s. My mom had a hysterectomy when I was in eighth grade, so she didn't follow the normal course. But just hearing the way the medical profession has talked about menopause as like women are no longer viable and they're old, and I'm like, okay, so men lose testosterone and they're not considered old. I mean, they have the little blue pill. Like, we do need to change the conversation because this can start as early as your 30s. So are we telling women that, like, oh, as soon as this starts happening, you're old and not viable? No, we are still viable, and we will actually be in this phase longer than we will, in the phase of being able to have kids, if we whether we want them or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So
Yeah.
let's go back to talking about the formulation of your product, because you were saying, you had to figure it out and how to make sure that it was suitable for for the vulva, the vagina. Like, it's a complicated area. So how, and you said you talked to doctors, how did you make sure, like, how long did that process take to figure out, like, you can use these ingredients, you can't use these ingredients, or even maybe mixing them together and knowing the right concentrations?
I mean, it was an ongoing process. I think it took several months to really iterate and get feedback. We'd get feedback and then we'd iterate and we get other feedback, and sometimes contradictory, right? Because also every physician has a particular mindset and way of working with their patients or personal experiences that can inform their advice to us. And then we would also, look at the literature, which sometimes is trying a little bit more novel or experimental ingredients. Um, it took, I want to say, like 3 to 6 months to really hone in on what we thought was our, solid product. And really, I think one of the biggest like formulation ethos that we carry to date is there's a huge sort of I don't want to call it a trend, but just this huge preference for more natural ingredients and natural products. And personally, just, I had grown up in a household where we often did try a lot of Ayurvedic and natural practices. And I think today you see a lot more of an appetite for things like functional medicine, where they're combining sort of allopathic ways and also naturopathic ways. And personally, I'm a big fan, because it's like, why wouldn't you look for all different types of solutions and get to the root cause of things? So that kind of informed a lot of this journey. Is like, we wanted to be as natural as possible, because we, by the way, if you need hormone replacement therapy and that's what you need to feel your best, like Catherine and I are the biggest advocates. Like, we celebrated the day the black box warning was overturned. Like, it's such a huge win for women's health. That being said, like, the analogy I like to often call out is, let's say you had a rash or a cut. Your first instinct is probably to order something online or go to CVS and pick up Neosporin or whatever alternative product that you like, whether it be natural or something more, um, you know, pharmacy grade. But then, if that's not working for you, or that's not really solving the issue and it's persistent and recurrent, then you might go try to find a physician, particularly a specialist like a dermatologist, who can help you figure out what's going on and try something prescription grade. And so, similarly for vulvar dryness, something that we learned from a lot of the women we spoke to is, for some women, it's the same every day. They're feeling the same burn, the cracked skin, whatever it might be. For others, it's like, certain times of the month it's really bad, and then other times it's okay, and then certain regions are more impacted. Like, some women really get affected near the labia, and others, closer to their vaginal opening. And we just learned all of these intricacies of the symptom itself. And so, long story short, we wanted to be able to address that woman who is experiencing this and wanted a quick solution to try something that wasn't going to do any harm, um, and see if it kind of solved the problem for her before she needed to go see a physician. And so, yeah, that was a little bit of the process up front.
I'm gonna say, Blythe, one thing I'll add is we're actually so we're pre-launch right now, and leading up to our launch, we do get a lot of questions about, how do I know that this product is safe for vulvar and vaginal skin? So we're actually moving into a microbiome study, where basically what we're having women do is, over a 3-week time period, they will use our product every single day. And each day, we're going to study a sample of their vaginal bacteria to understand if we're seeing any changes in the bacterial makeup as a result of consistent use of Rora. Because the absolute last thing that we want to do is put someone at an increased risk of a yeast infection or bacterial vaginosis. So we're really running some additional safety tests, both from the microbiome standpoint, and then we're also doing some skin sensitivity testing, just to make sure that our product is going to be both efficacious but also super safe for the specific region.
I love that. That's great. Because do you guys feel the pressure? Like you were saying, Neha, like, there's this movement to use more natural products, but you also have to be careful, because I always joke nature's trying to kill us. And some things, like, you wouldn't go out and be like, oh, let me put some, cyanide on my body, or let me like
Yeah.
rub myself in poison ivy. And there's a lot of misinformation, because there's just the keyboard warriors and the TikTok warriors, like, that are saying, don't use this, do use this. They go in the supermarkets. So a lot of the brands, I feel like, that are in that like natural, don't go the extra step that you guys are going to do the study. So did you do the study because that was important to you, but also because of the pressure you feel from the category of being natural?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a little bit less about the pressure we feel in the category and more just something that is really a core value for us
Yeah.
as a business. We think it's really important to show women the clinical data around the product, both in terms of efficacy and in terms of safety, because there's a lot of products on the market and it's difficult to understand what are the actual impacts of using this. And so much of what we stand for at Rora is knowledge is power. We want to give women as much knowledge as possible, whether it's about our products in general or women's health at large. So that's really why we focused on this. I also think, in the space of consumer products marketed towards women, there's just a lot of misinformation. Whether it's something that you're seeing on social media or shady advertising practices, I think a lot of times it really is difficult to discern, is this a helpful product? Is it a harmful product? Or is it just snake oil? And so we really want to show our customers, there's real tangible benefits of using Rora consistently. And moreover, it's not going to cause any further issues, especially because we know women who are using our products are really at a sensitive time in their life. The last thing that we want to do is cause a further issue or further harm. So we think that these tests are really instrumental in building trust with our customers.
And just to pull back the curtain a little bit for like for you or for any of your listeners who may not know this, but so many brands reach out to these co-manufacturers and will just private label any sort of formulation, right? And by the way, whether or not you may know this, but for vulvar skin, it's not really regulated by the FDA because it's the external vaginal area. So we're not considered a medical device versus if something was intended for internal use, you would be a medical device and have to go through that regulatory process. And often we've seen this around us where brands will just go private label a product. And because it's private label, that product has already been stability tested, meaning they have a shelf life for it. They have the basic microbial testing on whether or not, it's not growing any sort of microbes or fungal properties. And then they just market it and they sell it. And it's never really personalized to that area of anatomy. It hasn't been really clinically built from the ground up. And part of our passion is we built this product from the ground up, right? And we did all the research behind the scenes. And so now we also wanted to get external validation. And we did that in the ways we could early on through physicians or talking to different type of experts or chemists. But now we really want the testing and the consumer perception studies because that really just helps validate that this is what the actual end woman wants. And the way we've been raised also in our school environment and just personally, it's like we're supposed to be, we love being very customer centric. We don't want to create something to then like back into some sort of like sales process. We want this to be inherently something that's solving an unmet need. And so that validation from those tests really helps as well.
Well, and I think that's the most important thing with starting a brand. I work in advertising, if you guys don't know, besides this little project I have. And yeah, that's how you want to build a brand, by answering and solving a need and not just going, well, I want to jump into this category. Because you see that now, because perimenopause and menopause is such a popular topic, that
Yeah.
people are just jumping in. And I will look at things and go, is that okay to use? Like, what are the data? And just because it has a celebrity, I mean, there are some celebrities who have started the conversation, but some of them I feel like now are just jumping in, and I'm like, I don't know about that. And so you start questioning.
100%.
100%. And I think something that we get asked from time to time is, are you genuinely interested in this space? Or are you just working on this because menopause is hot right now? Which I always find really funny because I'm 29 years old, Neha's 32. And if I was only working on this because menopause was hot, I would not be working on this. Like the average 29-year-old is not super passionate about vulvar care and menopause. So for me and for Neha, we feel like this is something that we're genuinely super fired up about. Obviously, it's nice that there's a lot more discussion and there's a lot more innovation in the space. but I always laugh every time people ask us that.
And
Yeah,
it doesn't make our life easy by any means, by the way. Like being two female founders is already hard enough. And then you walk into a pitch and you're like, we're going to talk about menopause. And specifically, we're going to talk about the vulva. And like everyone turns beet red. And it's this whole song and dance of how to make people comfortable, educate them. It's because we care. And I think each conversation at least helps someone normalize the topic. And that's a win in our book.
absolutely. And yeah, I was going to ask you, we always hear stories about female founders. It's challenging because a lot of times you walk into rooms, and especially if the product is directed specifically at women, you're walking to a room with men who don't understand women stuff at all, and you're pitching them or trying to get fundraising, and it must be like just so frustrating sometimes when you're trying to explain stuff, and if you do, they still don't understand it, or they're like, well, I don't know, and it's like, you're not a woman, so why are you you
Well,
know voicing your opinion?
we've had some funny stories. I think one of them was, we did a little pitch and someone asked us, and these are two men. They're like, well, but why is this bad? Why is dryness bad? And, it was a moment of frustration, obviously, like as women we're like, duh. But also it was a moment of reflection where it's like, wow, okay, this is so not talked about and understood that we got to take a step back and really explain it. So now every time we pitch, we use visceral language around what it feels like. It feels like a sunburn, it feels like cracked, bleeding skin. And that immediately kind of puts people in the mindset of, okay, this is a problem. So we've learned a lot along the way in terms of how to have this conversation with different types of people.
And
That's
I
funny.
think
That's funny. The
something
why is it like, why is dryness? I'm like, I would want to be like, you have balls, right? Don't those get uncomfortable when they're dry? Do you think that we would
Also,
have
like skin dryness, like
right?
everyone knows
Like,
what dry skin feels like, right?
exactly. Anyway, sorry, Catherine. Go ahead. You were going to say
No,
something.
I was going to say something that I'll add too is I think as we've done so many different pitches, we've really learned a couple tools to kind of help us break through, especially in like a heavily male audience. So I remember Neha and I were in Houston in the spring for a pitch, and we had one pitch where the room was maybe 50% women, which is pretty rare for a pitch. And when we finish the pitch, we get to Q&A, and immediately we have tons of people asking questions. The women are super fired up. And what was so interesting was when we left the pitch, a lot of the men came out to talk to us and they said, I was kind of skeptical of your business until I saw all the questions from the women. I've never seen this type of response from them before. And so I think really finding those advocates in the room, even if it's one woman who's in her 50s, that really makes such a difference for us. And then I think the next thing that we've seen is that for a lot of men who maybe they're not married to a woman, or maybe they are just younger and they don't know a lot about perimenopause, menopause, and the symptoms surrounding it, if we can actually bring them a sample and show them on our arm how it's used and offer them a sample to give to someone in their life, that really helps them understand it a little bit more, because we can say, hey, we know you might not know a lot about vulvar dryness. Can you give this to your older sister, have her use it, ask her some questions about it, and then that will give you a little bit more information into the mindset of our customer, and that's been really instrumental in helping this product kind of come to life for them.
That is so smart. Yeah, because it is challenging as women, and you do, especially in this category, trying to explain it to men. I think reminding them, by the way, you have women in your life, they might need this, and and they do care about the women in their life. So yeah, bringing that in
Definitely.
is so we're nearing towards the end. But you guys, so you're in pre-launch phase. When are you officially planning to launch?
We're going to be ready to launch spring of 2026.
Okay.
We're currently in production, and so we're super excited. It's going to be like an unreal feeling to actually hold, our bottle, be able to mist it live on these types of podcasts and calls. So yeah, we're really genuinely looking forward to that.
That's awesome. So have you had the chance to actually hold the product yourself and the finished product and be like, yes? Well, because you have to go through the process of saying yes, no, this is what we want.
It's not in its beautified state right now. If anybody has ever built anything behind the scenes, it's like even with packaging, we going through so many different renditions to our earlier conversation to make sure there's compatibility between the formulation and how it's dispensed and how it looks and how we can ship. And so we've seen all the different components, but to like really see it all come together and just be the beautiful bottle on the shelf, we're very excited.
Well, and you bring up a good point that I think a lot of people don't think about, and you hear this when people are talking about just skincare in general, like why something is packaged this way. Because you have a formulation, which is the first step, but then you have to make sure it's in the right packaging. Like, does it need to be clear? Does it need to be or airless pump or whatever it is? So that's a whole other that adds time to make sure everything is compatible. Because you don't want people to get a product and go, it won't work or whatever, it's not coming out or yeah.
It's one of our core value propositions is that given that this is intended for vulvar use, you can imagine if a woman is standing in a restroom or sitting on the toilet to use this product, she's going to need to invert the bottle, right? To be able to spray. And so most misters don't work upside down. And that is a physics problem that we have been tackling for the past 6 months in terms of what's the latest technology in packaging to really ensure that. Because at the end of the day, above all else, and there's so many things on our wish list, but above all else, we want to make sure that the product is actually usable. Every last drop, we recognize it's an investment. We recognize you're going through something painful, and it's so frustrating when you buy something you're excited about and then it doesn't really come out the way you expect it. So that's really something we've been optimizing for, and now we feel good about it. But it was a journey to get there.
I can only imagine. So you're launching in spring of next year, and if people want to buy this product in spring of next year, is it going to just be on your website? I'm sure just in the first stage, like, do you have plans to maybe get it into retail at some point, or are you just going to like let's just start being with our website first?
Yes. So when we launch in the spring, it will originally just be sold on our website. Our website is tryrora.com if you're interested in learning more. And that being said, we do plan to expand to retail pretty quickly. So we're already in conversations with a couple of specialty retailers. Most of them are on the East Coast, but really hoping to kind of get distribution across the country. And our ultimate goal is we really want to have nationwide distribution with a big retailer. I don't think that's something that we'll see within the next 2 years. We really want to test our first couple of products. So we're working on the mist, obviously, as our first product, but we'll be launching a couple of other products in 2026 as well. Also in the vulvar dryness space, but just different form factors and slightly different uses. And we're going to test those in those specialty retailers before we look to really expand nationwide.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you what was your plan for the future of expanding products. So
Yes.
can people go to your website and then kind of like get on your email list to
Yeah,
follow when things are okay?
of
I'll include
course.
that in the show notes, by the way.
Yes. So if you go to our website, which is tryrora.com, you can sign up for our email list. We also write a women's health newsletter that we're relaunching next month. And it provides great science backed information about different women's health issues. So people can sign up for that as well. We're also on Instagram and TikTok at Tryrora Products, where you can learn a little bit more about the product and kind of get a behind the scenes view of what it's like to be building a women's health company.
Awesome. I'm so excited for you guys. It sounds like, I mean, you've done so much work. I can't wait to see it come to fruition. And it's such a great, you've created a product that is going to help a lot of women, and that's amazing. And also it's a women owned brand. So yes, we
Yeah.
need more women in this space, and also that can push the places that you're pitching to or the fundraising to be like, we know ourselves and we have products to help us, and y'all need to listen and just give us the money and give us the space on the shelf. And
Yes, give us the money. Yeah, our dream just to kind of, give you an understanding, our dream is really to be that one-stop shop for a variety of symptoms. We're starting in perimenopause, menopause. We really care about the space. But there's so many other women's health conditions where there's that gap, right, between needing something before you go see an expert or just wanting to feel seen and heard about the symptom that you're having. And so that's really Catherine and I's like goal and vision, is to make Rora be that common household brand. But I think something that's so integral along the way and something that we're really, really obsessed about is being customer centered. And so if you're someone who's going through something and you're like, I want this type of product, but it doesn't exist, or you just needed a platform to vent, like our TikTok is more of a community. And we just had, a video that, went pretty viral where people are just sharing their experiences. And I think one of the best things that's come out of this is there's just such a sense of support and feeling not alone. And I think that's what a lot of women are craving. And by the way, we read almost every single comment. And anything that you want us to look into, we will. Like, we love that. So if being on TikTok is your thing, check us out.
And yes, I will put that in there. And if I'll put the video too that you mentioned so people can go and watch it. Well, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Neha, for being on. I'm so glad I was in Chicago, even though I lost my voice after. But a chance networking meeting, I was introduced to you both, and I'm very excited. And keep me posted. And when it launches, I will share it again on the podcast and on socials. And thank you both for joining me today. It was a really enlightening and engaging conversation.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much,
much.
Blay. It was so great so great getting to chat with you, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, really, really appreciate you taking the time to hear our story. So thank you.
Thank you so much to Catherine and Neha for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to them. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. I will keep you posted on when Rora launches, so that if you are experiencing vulvar dryness, you can get their product. I also recommend going on their website and signing up for their email newsletter to see when the product's coming out, and also to get more information about women's health. I'm so impressed by both of them. They're really doing the work and creating such an amazing product and an amazing brand. And it was really interesting hearing, about the struggle that female entrepreneurs go through, especially when you're talking about women's health, because we all know men don't know about it. I mean, we have a hard enough time learning because there are conversations we're not having. So I do think that their brand and their goals for their brand will continue to open up the conversation around women's health and perimenopause and menopause. I will include all of their information in the show notes, links to their site and their social media as well, so you can follow along in the journey. And before I sign off, let me let you know that we have one more podcast coming up in this season. I think it'll be, episode 45. It will be our book club chat about A Wrinkle in Time. And then we will go on a little break. But I will share more about that in the next episode. So without further ado, my fellow Gen Xers, don't you forget about me, because I will not forget about you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Gen X Experience. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it on social media or with a friend. We'll see you back here next time.